Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be talking to you today about the first half of June and the lunar eclipse that we have coming up in Sagittarius on the 5th. So we really are entering eclipse season now, and in fact between the 5th of June and the 5th of July we're going to be having 3 eclipses. In 2020 in total we have 6 eclipses as opposed to the normal 4. 4 lunar and 2 solar, so that really does emphasize that 2020 is a very important and very pivotal year, because when we have eclipses, our evolution of humanity tends to be accelerated and jumped forward, and I think we're going to feel that very intensely through this eclipse season. And intensity is another word that comes up with eclipses. There's always this feeling of compression and intensity. But as I mentioned a couple of videos ago, the transiting nodal axis moved into Gemini and Sagittarius on the 5th of May. And in order for eclipses to happen, the new and full moons have to be close to that transiting nodal axis. So firstly, see where the opposing signs of Gemini and Sagittarius fall in your birth chart, which houses which areas of life. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. And if you go to this link above, that will take you to my store, and you can buy a 2-part tutorial video series that will explain all of this, because that will give it much more meaning. But normally there's a theme, about an 18-month theme that's set up in those 2 areas of life, those 2 house areas that are opposing each other in your birth chart, Gemini and Sagittarius, that are going to be very activated during this 18-month period before they retrograde back into Taurus and Scorpio. So, if any event or experience has not already set up a theme for you, you may well find that this lunar eclipse in Sagittarius coming up on the 5th of June does that very thing. It kicks off an event, an experience that you say, okay, this is the theme that is going to become quite predominant over the next 18 months. It's really helpful to see that. We can start to live our astrology at deeper levels then. So, the themes I talked about in May, the main theme of what is true and what is not, is going to continue through June, because we have Neptune strongly here. I'll talk about the detail of that in a moment. But from September to March, the transiting nodal axis comes into square Neptune. And that is exact in late January. But we're going to be having strong Neptune before that. So a Neptune at its highest level is to do with unconditional love, spirituality, compassion. And when it's square that transiting nodal axis, that can be a real spiritual jump in our evolution. We have to incorporate the spiritual into where we're evolving to collectively. However, at a lower level of expression, a kind of collective level or a mundane level, very often, it can manifest as fog or doubt or lack of clarity. Things aren't as they seem, or the other person in your personal life or the other people on the world stage perhaps don't want you to be clear on what is the truth. So Neptune, think of it as Lord of the Sea. You know, the tide comes in and then the waves pull back again. It acts like an undertow to what you thought. So we could again be going through these layers of, I'm clear, I know what the situation is, I know what my reality is, I know what my world is, I know what my beliefs are, but then all of a sudden we get this other information coming in to us. So just be very aware of that. And specifically with Neptune in this first part of June, Venus retrograde in Gemini is square to Neptune in Pisces. Now, it's not an exact square, it's sort of pulling back, but for the first week, it's an operational square. Now, whenever a planet is retrograde, if you think of the letters RE, think of the words like reassess, reevaluate, go back over. That is what is happening when a planet goes retrograde. So what is Venus about? Well, you could be going back over how you feel about your love relationships. You could be reevaluating your finances. Venus. You could be reevaluating what you really want, what gives you pleasure, Venus. But because it is in the sign of Gemini, and Gemini is our mental faculty, and it's square to Neptune in Pisces too, the head and the heart could be at odds here. What we think may clash with what we feel. So try and use the heart as your best guide here. So Venus squaring Neptune, not exactly widely, for the first week in June. The Sun then takes over in that square and squares Neptune for the second week in June. And that square is exact on the 10th. So it's highlighting these issues around, it could even be deception. It could go as far as that with Neptune. It could be lies or deceptions, that things that have not been clear and perhaps deliberately have not made clear to you. But then we have a lot of new information coming in at us because we have the Sun, Venus and the North Node in Gemini. And the urge of Gemini is always to gather information here and there, lots of different sources about lots of different things. It's quite divergent energy. So it wants to bring in new information. And that new information may at times clash with our belief system. Sagittarius, very linked to our belief system. And particularly when the Sun and Moon, always opposite each other at a full moon, at a lunar eclipse, are square to Neptune. So just be aware of that. And that's why I think the best thing to do with this is really to try and be the observer. To try and take in information. That's absolutely fine if you want to take in new facts, new data. But try and not get too attached to any particular narrative, because if new information comes in that causes you to doubt that, that could really rock your world. So try and stay neutral, try and stay calm, try and stay the observer, because they're going to be a lot of disclosures, I think, all the way through this year. And this is one of the the key times there's going to be disclosure, because a lunar eclipse is a big full moon. Full moons will shine a light, often on things that we weren't aware of before. And a lunar eclipse is even stronger in that. So I think even over the last 2 months of lockdown, there have been many people who've radically changed their belief system. I know I certainly have in the last 2 months. So try and stay in that neutral place. So this lunar eclipse happens at 15 degrees and 34 minutes of Sagittarius on the 5th of June. It happens at 12:12 p.m. Pacific and 8:12 p.m. UK time. So see where 15 of Sagittarius falls in your chart. So as I say, this is a full moon. It's shining a light on new information for you. The big themes that may come up at this time are issues of freedom, Sagittarius, that's certainly going to be one of them, I think. Truth, a big one. Justice, the law. Beliefs are going to be particularly strong, I think, because not only is this lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, but the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is conjunct Pluto. I've talked about the crisis, Pluto in beliefs, Jupiter, and also because Jupiter is also retrograde. We're revising and reassessing and reevaluating our beliefs. So these are really, really clear themes that are happening now. So disclosure, truth, freedom, and not only are the Sun and Moon in their opposition square to Neptune. Neptune's at 20 of Pisces, Sun and Moon at 15 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, but they are also exactly square to Mars. Mars is also in Pisces. So although it isn't an exact square, it's a strong one, because this could at times make you feel edgy, irritable, angry even. You may express those angry views on social media, Gemini. Try not to get into angry confrontations if you can, because what you're doing really is creating resistance. You're feeding what you don't want. You're giving a lot of attention and energy to what you don't want. So that's why I always try and stay one step back from that. I try my very best to stay neutral and stay out of those kind of tit-for-tat discussions if I can. Now, Mars is conjunct Neptune the first 3 weeks of June. It's exact, that conjunction, on the 12th and the 13th. Now, this can have a wonderful expression as spiritual action. That can be a physical spiritual practice like yoga, tai chi, qigong, that sort of thing. It can also be taking spiritual action. You know, if you're able to attend, I don't know if you are at the moment, but able to go down and help homeless people in a soup run, that would be spiritual action because it's putting energy into compassion. So anything like that, or even any meditative practice, is a really excellent expression of Mars conjunct Neptune. However, again, at a less positive level, Mars is your goals, what you want to achieve. And in Pisces, conjunct Neptune, they can somehow just elude you, or we kind of lose focus. Mars focus, Neptune dissolves. Or we can lose energy. Neptune dissolves, lose Mars energy. We can just lose the energy. They just don't get done. They just slightly out of reach. So try and really live that conjunction at the higher level of being. Now, another fabulous aspect at this lunar eclipse is we have Mercury in tight sextile to Uranus. Mercury is at 9 of Cancer, Uranus is at 8 of Taurus, and this can bring in some really kind of out of the box, brilliant, genius ideas and solutions to help with some of our problems. Also, the eclipse path. Very often with an eclipse, the manifestations of the meaning of the eclipse happen most obviously in the countries where the eclipse path falls. Not necessarily on the day, but within some weeks and months following that. And this has quite a wide geography, this lunar eclipse, because it falls across Asia, Africa, Europe, Australia, some of Antarctica, and even southwest tip of South America. So it's got quite a big scale geographically. Now, it is a partial lunar eclipse, and it's a south node eclipse. And what that means is that the moon has to be, for an eclipse, it has to be either close to the north node, which is in Gemini at the moment, or close to the south node, which is in Sagittarius. It's close to the south node. So again, we have a very clear message of south node is connected to the past. So this eclipse, which is a culmination, a closure, an ending, a letting go, conjunct that south node, is a very clear message to let the past go. The past is gone. We are never going to have that normal, or whatever represented normal, in our lifetimes again. That is gone. So ideally, don't waste any energy in trying to kind of bring that back. Our beliefs from the past have also gone. So try and use this eclipse. Eclipses are always like pivot points to really start to create a new future. And one of the things that is immensely powerful at this lunar eclipse is that it is within 1 degree of the Great Attractor. And I've talked about the Great Attractor before. The real expert on the Great Attractor is a man called Philip Sedgwick, hugely knowledgeable. I'll put the link to his website down below. And the Great Attractor is this immense galactic force out in the cosmos. It moves at incredible speed. It has, it's a vortex of spinning magnetic and gravitational energy, and it sucks galaxies along in its wake. So if you have planets, in fact, the gravitational force is so strong that light bends around it. And that's why it's linked with precognition. People who have planets or their ascendant or their midheaven within a degree or so, 14 degrees of Sagittarius, tend to be able to see around corners. They have a gift of precognition. But when we have geometry of the planets lining up with this point, all of us can have that ability. We can kind of tune in to the power of the Great Attractor and that sense of precognition. So it's very future oriented in that way. Also, it is primordial creator energy. This is raw creator energy. So how wonderful is that, that when our past is falling away, the old structures and paradigms, Pluto in Capricorn, deconstruction of the old order is falling away, that we have this raw material to create a new world with. That is really, really exciting. Another exact aspect at this lunar eclipse is Eris in Aries is square to Pluto in Capricorn. In fact, that conjunction, that square runs all of 2020 and into late 2021, but it's exact at this lunar eclipse, so it's stronger. As I've mentioned before, Eris is the goddess of discord and chaos. In myth, she's the sister of Mars. She's the warrior for truth, and she's feisty. She doesn't mind stirring things up, taking to the streets, protesting. But in the square to Pluto in Capricorn, she's going to run up, or people on the street are going to run up against the power of the government, the law and order of the government repressing the protests on the street. Now that could be particularly strong around this time because Jupiter is conjunct Pluto within a couple of degrees, so it's expanding the potential power and control. But it's interesting, Hong Kong is in the last few days kicking off again and the issue is a new national security law that the residents of Hong Kong believe compromises their freedom. So again, this really clear theme of freedom coming up. So remember, Eris is the female awakener. She's the warrior for truth and she's the female awakener. So she doesn't just kick off for no reason. She does it to shake up the status quo and to wake us up to ultimately get us to a higher level of being. So there's some very interesting developments at this lunar eclipse. The real power of it, I think, lies in the tight conjunction to the Great Attractor. We're going to be moving into a more powerful, even second half of June. And I just always also want to say that that square I've just been talking about between Eris in Aries and Pluto in Capricorn is going to be super activated for the second half of the year because Mars moves into its own warrior sign of Aries in the last few days of June, stays there for 6 months, which is very rare. It normally stays in the sign for 6 weeks. It's going to stay there for 6 months and really activate the function of Eris's archetype in that square to Pluto. So we've got a very, very dynamic second half of 2020 to come. Hugely transformative, hugely pivotal. By the end of 2020, our life will look very different from the beginning. But remember, we are creating this. It isn't being handed to us. We have a say. We are powerful co-creators and we have a say in how these energies are unfolding. So I hope that's helped you. If you'd like more information about my books, my teaching videos, my very long monthly newsletter, just check out my website, pamgregory.com. And thanks so much for listening. Have a really powerful lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 5th of June. Bye for now.